Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. This was a week with tremendous events that have taken place in our lives, in our countries, in the world that we live in. But today, to begin with, I have the great privilege to greet all my Sikh friends Happy Guru Parab, 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Ji. This is also the moment in which the Kartarpur corridor has been opened, and more than 2,000 visitors have already reached there to pay their respects, which is right across the border from Punjab. So, as this is a very epochal event, in the sense that I recall during my young days that when the Khalistan movement was on, it was here in Washington, D.C. that Rajiv Gandhi had told the protesters that if you want your own country, go to the neighboring place because the Kartarpur Sahib is over there. This is a very interestingly significant event. We will talk about it as we move along, not only today, but some other time as well. But to come back to another very significant effect, that in August, when Prime Minister announced the abrogation of Article 370 in Kashmir, Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, as I always call it, today it has happened that it is now a full-fledged union territories. Ladakh is one, Jammu and Kashmir is another. With this, the age-old special treatment of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh is over, statutory-wise, as also the impact and implication from the governance point of view that people of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh will have full integration with India, and all Indian laws will be applicable, benefits available. The consequences of that is remarkably significant. The people who were given ultra high security status, people have begun to vacate those homes and move into other places. Very, very important thing. And also because the Kashmir issue has been a kind of a situation in which I feel at times that when more than 300,000 Kashmiris were thrown out of Kashmir, India did not respond and react in the manner that it ought to have done. Because that was not only a genocide, it was, those people were driven out of their homes. Today, as many years later, that has become a uniting force for entire India, because today, Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh is fully integrated. To discuss this as well as many other matters, I have great privilege in welcoming my very dear friend, Dr. Krishna Jhaveri. Dr. Saab, welcome. And as the world knows, he's a very famous urologist, a community activist, and also has the ability, an uncanny ability to crack a joke at the most appropriate time. So welcome to my show, and thank you very much for joining us. So Doctor, I wanted to check with you on this one, and at the common sense level. I'm not trying to say that let's go dive into the constitutionality and all that stuff, but to talk about on the human dimension point of view. How do you personally feel about this integration of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh with India, and the fact that all Indian laws will be applicable to every Kashmiri living there, Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, and the so-called special status which had become the cause célèbre for everything that was happening there with the terrorism, misuse of funds, grants. How are you feeling about that?
Well, the August 5th was a historical day for India and in fact for the world, as we know that the Modi ji made an announcement that the Article 370 and 35A was abrogated by the highest people from India, and that was a very joyous moment for India. We have been suffering for last 70 years in Kashmir with all kind of terrorism and poverty and a lot of cross-border terrorism, etc. Like I mentioned, that August 5th was a historical day to abrogate the constitution and declare as Jammu and Kashmir as the part of the India and Ladakh as the part of the India. And I think that people took it very well. The Kashmiri people are very happy, and there are always problems when you take such a big step, but things are working out fairly well.
And I'm glad you said that things are working out very well, because of one of the things that happens. We are living in a remarkably interconnected world because of technology. And because of that, news travels very fast. We are now all used to our smartphones and WhatsApp and all these tools to connect and reach out to people. And for the government at that time had to put a control as to how to protect people from incendiary group of people who would incite violence. Now that was also very important from another point of view. And that was because our neighbor has no other agenda. Pakistan has no other agenda but to foment Kashmir issue as if they are the protectors of Kashmiri rights. But that was a hogwash. We know that how Pakistan Prime Minister and their ministers, the latest one is that one of the ministers has said that any country that is supporting India in this matter will be also subjected to Pakistani attack if something were to happen. Now, how irresponsible is that kind of a statement coming from head of the government, Imran Khan, who virtually called for a nuclear war? He called for jihad. He instigated bloodbath. And India had to take protective action that must not happen. So in our US Constitution, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is the goal of every human being. But in the absence of life, there is no pursuit of happiness or liberty. So Government of India took a very calculated, firm hand to protect the people and prevent incitement of violence. So the criticism that, including the Indian congressmen in the United States, they said human rights have been suspended, and they were angry about that. But the fact is that if you don't protect life, nothing else matters.
Absolutely.
So your thought on that?
Well, when you change the constitution and take over such a large area of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, apparently they have been suffering with the terrorism for last 70 years. And it has to end somewhere, and India took a very bold step, and obviously the terrorists are still trying to infiltrate from the border and trying to create a chaos in the Kashmir so that they can tell the world that Kashmir still is having a problem. And that was one of the reasons that why the Indian government decided to stop the internet services and cell phone services and other things which are considered as a human right violation. I don't think that, like you said, that it's a human right violation, because if the people are dying, where is the human rights? And primarily that was the reason that these services, but now recently I read that all the services are being restored, the cell phones, postpaid cell phones are restored, internet services are getting restored, and there is a calm. The tourism has started, which is the biggest thing, and I think that there is a peace in Kashmir, and if we hold it, Kashmir will be a real heaven in terms of Kashmir heaven.
Absolutely, thank you for saying that, because one of the things which is important here is that somewhere along the line, the entire state of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh had three distinct cultural identities.
Yep.
Ladakh had 50% of the land and had a Buddhist culture. Jammu is Hindu, Kashmir is Muslim. So the entire world had been hijacked as if when you refer to Kashmir, it is everything is Kashmir over there.
Yeah.
So that way, one of the most wonderful things that has happened is the protection of the cultural identity of every region. Ladakh is now protected. And I believe, my personal belief is, I have not read anything about it as yet, that Ladakh will become much greater, faster economic unit than other two if people begin to invest, because that is a beautiful piece of land that can become a terrorist free, and it will become a traveler's paradise. So that's the way I look at it. The other part also is very important, is that when in that area, there was a whole lot of grants and monies were going to that country, to that state. Now, the important part here is that 70% of the money that used to go to JKL used to be in the form of grant. Only 30% used to be loan. Whereas the rest of the country, the central fund that was distributed was always 30% grant and 70% as loan. So the repayment capacity of the Jammu and Kashmir Ladakh region had been very easy and not very tight. So the question does arise, where did that money go? Why poverty was that not economic development, no economic development was happening? Who is to be blamed for that? And I think that the central government must do a CAG audit, Comptroller and Auditor General audit, to determine the flow of funds as to who took the money, what happened to that. If the newspaper reports are to be believed, all the big leaders of Kashmir area were building their own big homes at the expense of the people. So that is another area which is very important. And I would also want you to comment on one other aspect, that I have personally been very disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed at the style and the way in the Pakistani Prime Minister has been raking up issue about this. And I am very delighted and happy that the international community supported India. Even the recent European Union parliamentary delegation of 23 MPs from that area, they came back and they said that 370 was an internal matter of India, and we have, as a world, to support India in the fight against terrorism. So that was a very remarkable event. And on the contrary, they also added that the killing of 5 laborers, agriculture laborers, was a heinous act, and they condemned it. So the world has responded remarkably well, and thanks to Mr. Modi's initiatives of bringing the world to understand the dynamics of India's internal matter. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to make 2 points. Number one, we were talking about the Ladakh. The people in Ladakh are very happy that India abrogated and took over the Ladakh. And the reason they are happy, that there has not been any development or very little development in last 30, 40, 50 years. And since the India took over, the people are happy because they know that India will take initiative to start all kind of economic growth, the political, cultural, everything. So the people in Ladakh are very happy. As far as the Pakistan is concerned, the United Nations, they raised the issue in the United Nations that what India did was wrong, and the United Nations declared that the United Nations declared that this is an internal affair of between India and Pakistan, and we will not interfere with that issue.
Right.
And second thing, that like you said, that 23 member of parliament recently visited Kashmir, and they went all around, they saw everything, and the European Parliament said again the same thing, that this is an internal matter between the India and Pakistan. So these are the things that is a big win for India, and I salute Prime Minister Modi for doing this, and that has not been done in last 70 years by anybody else.
Right. I mean, if you remember, Farooq Abdullah had made a statement that it will take more than 100 years for Modi to remove Article 370. And soon after elections were over, he did it within 70 days of the election that took place. Now, this is remarkable story that Prime Minister Modi has dealt with Pakistan in a manner that they never expected that would happen. Prime Minister has virtually isolated Pakistan in the global politics. Think about it like this. Soon after EU parliamentary delegation left, Prime Minister was in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia has now become a one-off trade partner of oil buy and sell to an investor.
Yes.
To the extent that, leave aside $100 billion that they are investing in India in infrastructure, the whole relationship has changed. And Pakistan used to bank upon Saudi Arabia to do that. But here is another matter about China. We have a minute and a half on that. I find that China is playing a losing game because China is getting isolated insofar as its own activities are concerned. Nobody likes China. Even the United States asked the Asian countries, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to stand up to China for its negative role that it plays in that region. China has his own Hong Kong problem. China has occupied Ladakh region. China has been ceded North Kashmir area by Pakistan for their Silk Road project. The question here is, what right does China have to tell India about its internal matter when they are the ones who are doing everything against the minorities in their countries?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. China has made a pact with Pakistan. It's called CPAC. And they have invested billions and billions of dollars in Pakistan, and therefore they have a relationship with the China, and China is supporting the Pakistan that whatever the India did was morally wrong. But that's the world doesn't say that. The world, everywhere you go, they always said that it's a bilateral issue and they should be solved between India and Pakistan.
Right. And this is very important because as we Indians need to be assertive about our own dialogue. It's very important to tell the world, every Indian, whether you are here or in India or anywhere in the world, must be very firm about certain things, that Pakistan has no locus standi to talk about human rights violations and protection of minorities in India when their own record, if to use American slang, sucks, literally.
Yeah.
So the point of the matter remains is that China has no right to talk about human rights. When the Uyghur problem, Muslim problem came about, Prime Minister Imran Khan said, it is an internal matter, we talk to them privately. Now there can't be anything more shameful than that. Stay tuned, we will be back right after this short break. We begin this segment with a conversation about America. Something significant happened this week, and that was the House passed the resolution to begin impeachment inquiry on President Trump. Impeachment is not a light matter that should be allowed to go by just like that. It's a very important issue. There are only 3 presidents in the past who went through this process. This is the 4th one. So has Mr. Trump done that he's being accused of? A couple of things bother. It's not the impeachment alone, what Mr. Trump has done, I don't know personally speaking, but it is important to know what's going on in real terms. And the real thing is very simple, that whatever Mr. Trump may have done in his presidential authority, right or wrong, he must be held accountable for that. Nobody is above the law. Nobody will dispute that. But my concern is about the Democratic Party. My personal concern is about Democratic Party, is the fact that they held the deliberations and interviews in private, in camera, without disclosing it to the people. Whereas this is the party which seeks transparency in every activity. This was rather sad because none of us knew. Even the Republican Party was not invited to speak or speak about it, meet or question the witnesses. This was rather terrible from my point of view, because if you are trying to do something, then let this be transparent. Let the world know the truth. But the issue here is quid pro quo. The issue here is Trump asking for help from Ukraine to defeat or investigate Joe Biden and his son. But the question here is that, Congress, Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton started the entire investigation on Trump-Russia collusion as an opposition research with the help of MI6 retiree. So the question here is rather important, is that how can a country's fabric be weakened to protect, in the name of democracy, you are using undemocratic processes to defeat the democratic principle? That I find is rather bizarre. Your thought on that?
Well, what I understood that President Trump had a dealing with the Ukraine, and like you say, quid pro quo, that if you don't do investigate Joe Biden or his son, then he will not give the significant amount of loan to the Ukraine, and that was the issue. And I do not know that at president's level if that is right or that is wrong. I believe that it's morally wrong to tell a country that if you don't do this for me, I will do this for you. And that is a wrong approach.
Yes, I totally agree with that. If he has actually asked for investigating a role, but we both know, we all know actually, that politics is a very strangely different game.
Yes.
Is far beyond our comprehension. We can only say Shatranj ke khiladi. They move one pawn to get a queen at some point in time. So, as a relationship, it is a global practice, in terms of international geopolitical issue. Every country takes advantage of its strength, and you always get things done from the position of strength. You do not surrender your position of the strength and go weak because your opponent is weak. You always play your best. And that's what is the word called leverage. So if you are leveraging your situation to gain a particular advantage for the country, not against an individual, that I will make a clear distinction on that. I'm not here to say that I'm in no way here to justify that if he asked Ukraine to investigate on Biden, that would be deemed wrong. But if the release manuscript of the entire telephone call, which 15 people are listening to, this is another very interesting thing.
Yeah.
That so many people are listening to it. Can a president be foolish enough to make a statement which can jeopardize him forever? Is it possible that it is a kind of a, what do you think about President Trump calling it a witch hunt? After especially that the Russian collusion thing has collapsed completely. It all started from there.
Yes, yes. Well, basically, like we discussed, that he should not be discussing this issue openly when people are listening, and even otherwise, as a president, you have a moral duty and moral authority to deal with the country at that level where the president of that country is. And you cannot blackmail somebody that if you don't do this for me, I will not do this for you. I think that's a wrong approach, and I don't agree with that.
That's perfectly fine. I mean, that's what we are talking about here, is the appropriateness of the action. Right and the wrong, the courts will decide.
Right.
The House will decide, the Senate will decide. There's a process for that. But what I'm saying is that, do you surrender your leverage position? And I believe if you hear both sides of the story, that aid which was going through has already gone. It's not that it was held up because of that. Ukraine did not investigate Biden family, and they got the money as it is. So the question is, was President trying to get some leverage to find out the corruption angle. I mean, it's a very hilarious one. You are a professional, I am a professional, and we always find suitability for doing something. Biden's son was paid $50,000 or $80,000 a month for a work that he had no experience, he knew nothing about. So that itself is a classic example of what was that deal all about. So we will cut short that dialogue because impeachment is a very big news. Impeachment inquiry is a big news, and it will unfold as it does. Stepping into the second domain regarding America itself, we now know that the famous ISIS leader al-Baghdadi is no more. He was brutally killed, taken out by the US Special Forces, and he is no more. So one of the Trump promises was to eliminate ISIS, but ISIS as a physical structure is demolished to a great extent, but as an idea, it still lives perhaps, and it will live. Ideas don't die, ideas live. So my thought process is, this is a real blow to the world community, and the impact and implication is something remarkable. There's somewhere along the line, the collusion thing that is happening. Think about it. Osama bin Laden was within 1 mile distance of Pakistan Army headquarters.
Yes.
And this guy was being protected by Al-Qaeda. He was paying them $67,000 fee he had paid them right near Turkey. So this is very truly remarkable, that how do we account for this kind of a behavior of countries like Turkey and Pakistan, who were home to these big terrorists who killed, maimed, brutalized people all over the time, including burning somebody in the cage, a Jordanian soldier. So Washington Post wrote that he was a scholar. How do we account for this kind of a narrative in the media, in the liberal media? Any thought on that? I'm aghast.
Well, first of all, as a US citizen, I salute President Trump for almost destroying the ISIS and all the leaders, the big leaders of ISIS. Recently, like you mentioned, that Mr. al-Baghdadi, and I think one of his close associates was also killed
Yes.
recently. You mentioned about the Osama bin Laden, and the message here is that don't mess with America. If you do, we are going to hunt you, we are going to trace you, and we are going to kill you.
That's right. I mean, that is what the long arm of law eventually comes to catch up with you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. We will go back to India in this segment, and this is very important. It's important from a very significant event that happened in India. 2 states, Maharashtra and Haryana, went to elections. And as against exit polls and every impression that BJP-led alliances will win handsomely, in Haryana they were just barely able to make the government with the help of the opposition, some of the allies. And the deputy CM post was given to Chathala, one of the Chathala family members. In Maharashtra, it is a completely bizarre situation that Shiv Sena, who has had a love-hate relationship with BJP, is kind of behaving like a non-friend. I will not say like an enemy. I say Shiv Sena is behaving like a non-friend. After the elections are over, BJP gave you enough seats to contest on, and you did not win adequately. BJP's strike rate was far superior than anybody else. But what was interesting was that Sharad Pawar's party, NCP, and other groups also, including Congress, they got more than seats than they expected. So how is behavior of Shiv Sena helping the alliance, the friendship? Now, they are asking to make Aditya Thackeray the chief minister.
Right.
They're asking for 50-50 seat sharing. Is this negotiation or is it skullduggery? I'm totally disappointed about that. It also reflects on us as Hindus that we do not think unity is our strength. It's only a Panchatantra ki kahani hai. Strength in unity and unity is the strength is only a story in Panchatantra. Bhashan dene ke liye reh gayi hai sir.
Right.
And Shiv Sena is behaving really irresponsible in my opinion, is because they are now making it look really bad. Because bringing in Aditya Thackeray as a chief minister who makes Shiv Sena look like Thackeray party, not Shiv Sena, it's Thackeray Sena. It's not representing Shiv or Shivaji, it is representing Thackeray. And how different is the demand than a Pappu party of Congress? It's a family thing that BJP fought against. So you are from Bombay, you have lived there many years, you have roots there. Your thoughts on this part of the thing, including the challenge of Hindu unity, that is the need of the hour.
You know, the Shiv Sena has been acting in a very weird fashion, because politically speaking, you know, I saw Mr. Prime Minister Modi, he sat with Uddhav Thackeray and he discussed in detail about the plans of the Shiv Sena. And like you mentioned, that he wants his son Aditya Thackeray to become the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. Again, this is like you do something for me, I will do something for you. And that's not the right attitude. Right, quid pro quo. And that is not the right attitude, you know. And they should have a majority to say that. And I don't think that they have a majority. And that's the problem.
That's the problem. What do you think, you know, if I were advising Shiv Sena, I would tell them that, look, it's good to negotiate, to gain some additional power, or get a deputy chief ministership, or get some key portfolio. But the way they are doing it, politics is a game of perceptions. At this point in time, the perception of Mr. Modi in the world, in addition to India, is remarkably high.
Yes.
Shiv Sena ought to realize that they are in a good company. You will be remembered for the company you keep, not the company that you were trying to destroy or pull them down. And if you feel that this is my moment to get what I want, it will have repercussions. So the question here is, who is advising Shiv Sena, Uddhav Thackeray and others, that they are behaving as a reticent, belligerent child? This is what bothers me, and this is where they don't realize they are essentially weakening the Hindu fabric. Your thought on that?
Yeah, well, you know, like you mentioned, that the family tradition, that if like Gandhi family, that generations became the prime minister. It's similarly the Thackeray family thinks that, you know, their children and their children and their children become the chief of Maharashtra, and that is not a right attitude.
Right. I mean, this exactly, that's what I'm saying. That is not the right attitude, because it eventually will hurt them.
Exactly.
Because they are not popular anywhere in the country other than Mumbai or some seats in Maharashtra here and there.
Yeah.
So if they have to, Bala Saheb Thackeray had a remarkable role. Shiv Sena is actually the warrior group amongst the Hindus.
Yes.
And they should not sully their name. I have respect for them because they take up the cause. They are willing to stand up. The soldier cannot try to become the king overnight. That's the point which I am trying to say.
Right.
Coming back to another issue very important, which is going to come in few days now, is the Ayodhya verdict. The hearing is over, and Chief Justice Gogoi is going to announce the verdict very soon. But a very interesting thing happened. The Muslim Personal Law Board made an announcement that before the verdict comes, we should hand over the disputed land to the Hindus. That was truly remarkable.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
Yes, Muslim Personal Law Board made that announcement that we should hand over. In addition to the fact was that RSS also made the announcement that we should respect the rule of law and the verdict that comes. And they also instructed their members not to indulge in excessive celebration of any kind. This, I feel, is a display, ostensibly display of certain amount of maturity, because let's not go overboard in doing one or the other. The fact that, it's the funniest thing was that the entire Navratri time, the Supreme Court was on vacation for Ram Janmabhoomi, and they are disputing Ram's existence, whereas they are on vacation in his name. So that is quite something which I always in awe of, and I personally believe that the Muslims will do themselves and the country a good favor if they begin to come to terms with the fact and the reality that as aggressors and invaders in India, they did destroy thousands and thousands of temples. I mean, there is enough evidence to see that this temple has been, superstructure is of Islamic mosque, and the temples belong to Hindus. Now, this brings me to another matter, and I'm very concerned about the Hindu unity part of it. Somewhere along the line, if you look up the 1941 census, just Google it when you go back from here. 1941 census of India, you will find that there were only 145,000 British in the country, plus women and children. The 145,000 British ruled millions of Indians, mostly Hindus. Of course, Mughal Empire had fallen, so they were also part of the ruling thing. The point of the matter is that British used us as people. They used our people as sepoys, army, right? British used us as our soldiers in the Second World War and the First World War. And they used our resources to enrich themselves. And yet we have not learned any lesson about that. The need of the hour is Hindu unity. Why doesn't that happen?
Well, that's a tough question to answer because, the British people taught India the divide and rule, and people still unfortunately follow that tradition. I think the Hindu people should unite, and like you mentioned about the Ayodhya, that India is a land of justice, and whatever the Supreme Court decides, Hindus, Muslims, and the whole India should follow whatever the judgment of the Supreme Court is.
Absolutely correct. And that's what is important to remember, that in any situation, the seeming hostility that exists, I mean, if we say that we have Vedanta, we have knowledge, wisdom, historical, thousands and thousands of years of that, how is it that we were not able to protect ourselves against these very divisive techniques of people? Why didn't we see through that? And that is what is important, which is what is important with the BJP rule that has come about. The extreme liberals, as I call them, extreme liberals will cry about certain conservative policies, but you cannot fight the human element. Just as I always say, hate cannot have, if your policy is driven by hate, hate cannot have a moral or ethical justification to that.
Absolutely.
So the point which I'm trying to make is that it's time for Hindus to unite, not to defeat anybody, but to protect our own self. And that narrative is required. Coming back to one more important element, which is that we Indians, we NRIs, are often called upon to support Indian initiatives. The consulate, the embassies, they do that. We have 5 members of Congress who are Indians. They get very heavily funded by Indians around. But what is surprising is that on Kashmir issue, none of the 5 vocally supported Kashmir's accession and abrogation of Article 370. They went on the human rights issue. So there was a lot of upset because one of the congressmen was part of Pakistani Caucus.
Yes.
And none of them, only Raja Krishnamurti went to Houston summit. Nobody else went. So what was that? Are Indians committed to be, if I may use a strong word, wedded and enslaved by the Democratic Party? Are we Indians, 80% Indians are Democratic Party supporters? Why is it so? I mean, I do not know your political affiliation, you don't know mine, but that is a question that is in my mind. That how come we Indians are so successful, contribute so much to society, our people go in the Congress and they don't speak for us? What do we need to do?
Well, again, this is a political issue, and the politicians go to the people who give them money. It is simple as that. And apparently, I understand that the Pakistani people must have given a good amount of money or supported the certain congressmen, so they changed their view to join the Pakistani Caucus.
Was there a quid pro quo?
That I don't know.
Now, obviously, it was very important because apparently in one of the Kashmir hearings, one of the congressmen, when the Kashmiri people were talking about their plight and their suffering, he got up and left.
Yes.
Yeah, that is something which bothers.
Right.
And he has refused to, he continues to be part of Pakistani Caucus. And we all know that Pakistan doesn't mean well to India. It's just not
absolutely
in their genes to do
yeah.
that. As it always happens, every conversation must come to an end. And so does this today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Dr. Jhaveri, and I did, and I hope you did too. Dr. Jhaveri, thank you for being here, and look forward to having you again. And have a great weekend. See you again next week.